Look, if there's truth in that, some answers when we come back. Look, if there's truth in that, some answers when we come back. Look, if there's truth. Good evening. Get ready. Two clocks are ticking right now. One to a Senate vote, a first step toward preventing government shutdown. The other to the shutdown itself. At 10 Eastern time tonight, the Senate holds a procedural vote to end debate on a temporary spending bill. It needs 60 votes to succeed, and that's only to get to the real up or down vote. In any case, at 1 second after midnight, if there's no legislation, the government officially shuts down. As you might imagine, this has real-world consequences for millions of people, not to mention political fallout for everyone involved in Washington tonight. We'll be covering all aspects as the vote and the shutdown approach tonight. I want to start at the Capitol with CNN's Phil Mattingly. So Senate Democrats will meet behind closed doors in just a few minutes. What are your sources saying to expect from that meeting?
Well, Anderson, this will be the first meeting of Senate Democrats today, one we've expected for a while, given where things were actually headed. And basically what I've been told is it'll be a couple of things. It will be an update on where things stand. This will be the first meeting since Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer met with President Trump at the White House. Those talks, I'm told, between Schumer's team and the White House have continued since. It will also be kind of an update on pathways forward, potential pathways forward, perhaps off-ramps to this situation that they're currently in. But I think most importantly, perhaps, it'll be a gut check. There's no question about it, Anderson. This meeting, coming just 90 minutes before that vote, comes as Democrats are pretty clear, at least according to several sources that I've spoken with, that they still have the votes to prevent Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell from getting the 60 votes he needs to move forward. That would mean this vote that's scheduled at 10 p.m. is most certainly going to fail at this point, and after that, there is no clear resolution forward. Now, Democrats have said they're steadfast. They remain united. They aren't moving off where they've been, but this is the real time, Anderson. There's no more talk about what could happen. It's now happening. And they're going to have to decide whether or not to actually go through with it, Anderson.
Right. And so the vote that we're talking about that we've been waiting for since last night, it's now set to happen at 10 p.m. Is it really going to fail? I mean, that's based right now on what Democrats are saying. They have the votes to make it fail.
Yeah, purely in a numbers game, absolutely. The answer is yes. Look, you've got two Republicans that certainly will vote no, another one who's considering voting no. You've only got 3 Democrats out of the 49 in the chamber who have said they are willing to vote yes on this so far. We expect a couple more to join them. But given that there are only 50 Republicans in attendance right now, they obviously need more than just 3. And they need probably 12, 13, maybe even 14, depending on how things play out. As of this moment, it's pretty clear in both chambers right now that those votes don't exist. Now, the big question right now is, Anderson, is there some kind of shorter-term compromise, perhaps a 3-week continuing resolution that could be put up instead? I'm told at the moment Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is not considering that. He has been very clear throughout the last couple of days. There is a House-passed bill. It is a 4-week extension of government funding. It is a 6-year extension of the Children's Health Insurance Program. That is what's on the table. That is what has always been on the table. And anything else Democrats are looking for, that hasn't been negotiable. Now, how's that shifted throughout the last couple of hours because of the talks with President Trump? It's still somewhat of an open question. But at this point, Anderson, heading into this vote, there doesn't appear to be an alternative on the table. There certainly doesn't appear to be any deal within a near-term reach. And by all accounts right now, things are very much headed to a shutdown at midnight.
All right, Phil Mattingly. Phil, I want to go quickly now to the White House and CNN's Jim Acosta. So I understand the president has been actively involved in the process today, even at this hour. What are you hearing?
He has been, Anderson. As you saw, he met with the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer earlier today. He was on the phone with the House Speaker Paul Ryan later on in the afternoon. But just to echo what Phil Mattingly was saying, there is some skepticism over at the White House as to whether or not they can reach a deal sometime tonight. I talked to a senior White House official earlier this evening who was saying they were seeing smoke signals coming out of the Capitol, in the words of that official, smoke signals coming out of the Capitol. But they were mainly looking at some of those red state Democrats who were starting to signal that they would vote yes, like Joe Donnelly out of Indiana. You saw Heidi Heitkamp. And now they're also putting pressure on some of these other endangered red state Democrats like John Tester and Claire McCaskill. The White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders has been tweeting at them in the last couple of hours saying, get on board with some of these other Democrats who are thinking about voting with the Republicans. But Anderson, I just talked to a White House official in just the last few minutes about whether or not there might be the chance for some kind of alternative plan beyond this 4-week CR that they've been talking about, whether a short-term CR could somehow work. And this White House official was saying that is not likely to pass the House. So what Phil Mattingly was saying is exactly right. This is turning into a Tide Pod kind of night. Nobody really wants to swallow a compromise in this city tonight, Anderson.
That meeting with Chuck Schumer, I mean, did it produce any results? Did anything actually come out of it?
Well, the president tweeted earlier today that it was an excellent preliminary meeting, but that obviously did not go anywhere. We're going to have to see what happens when Democrats get together in about half an hour from now. But at this point, and I just talked to a source up on Capitol Hill a few moments ago, and this is echoing what Phil Mattingly was saying, they don't believe there are enough Democratic defections at this point to get that continuing resolution over the finish line that was passed out of the House. And if that does not happen, then they're in search of a plan B. And as I was just saying, a White House official over here was being very plain about this. They don't think that the House is going to go for a short-term continuing resolution. So at this point, they are running out of options and they're running out of time.
Right.
Anderson.
Jim Acosta, thanks very much. With us now is former Democratic presidential candidate and Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, as of right now, are you a no vote on the continuing resolution as it stands?
Yes. I think what is going on to me is very clear. That the Republicans really want to shut down the government for whatever reason. Where we are, Anderson, is not complicated. As you know, in the United States Senate, you need 60 votes to pass this budget resolution. Mitch McConnell doesn't have 60 votes. He doesn't have it. He knows he doesn't have it. The option that he has now is to say, okay, I don't have the 60 votes. Let us sit down and negotiate. Let us work in a nonpartisan way to address the crises facing this country. Last night, you may have heard this, we received a tweet from the Pentagon. And what the Pentagon told us is they need a fully funded fiscal year 2018 budget or face ramifications for our military. This is the Pentagon. They cannot function on a month-to-month basis. We are a $4 trillion government. We need to have an annual budget, because what's going on now is very, very dangerous and wasteful for our country. Many, many crises that have not even been addressed. We cannot keep kicking the can down the road.
Well, the Republicans, obviously, and the White House are saying, well, look, it's the Democrats who seem to want to shut down that by forcing the issue on immigration, on DACA, which is something that could be done a week from now.
That is not true. Here, again, is the situation. And let the viewers make their decision. Mitch McConnell does not have 60 votes. And if he goes forward tonight at 10 o'clock, as I understand he will lose. Therefore, the government will shut down. Understanding that, what a rational person who does not want to shut down the government does is say, okay, I don't have the 60 votes. I can't do it alone with the Republicans. We have to sit down and negotiate. What do you want? Let's go forward. That is what has to happen. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, I mean, they may think politically that a shutdown works to their benefit. You'll remember way back when the president, Donald Trump, was talking about how maybe the country needs a good government shutdown. I don't know. But I think it will be a very unfortunate thing. McConnell has got to start negotiating. And it's not just about DACA. We are 3.5 months into the fiscal year. 3.5 months. We still don't have an annual budget. You know what that means? It means 27 million people in community health centers have not received refunding, the new funding authorization. It means that 30,000 vacancies at the Veterans Administration are still not filled. It means we have a heroin and opioid epidemic sweeping this country. We are not addressing it. We have a collapsing infrastructure. We are not addressing it. So we have real work to do, and we can't simply have a dysfunctional government which doesn't address our problems and passes a continuing resolution month by month by month.
So if Mitch
that is not what we're paid to do.
If Mitch McConnell did come and say, okay, look, we don't have the votes, let's negotiate, it would be the points you would want are DACA and a more permanent budgetary solution.
And a disaster relief. Do you know that right now, 4 months after the terrible hurricanes in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, Texas, Florida, in Puerto Rico, you have tens of thousands of people who still don't have electricity. We're the wealthiest country in the history of the world. So what we need to do is to figure out a way as to how we're going to address the problems facing working families, how we're going to deal with disaster relief, how we're going to adequately fund the military. Last night, a poll came out. And with the poll, a CBS poll, it said 87% of the American people believe that we should provide legal status to the 800,000 dreamers in this country. 87% of the American people, an astronomical number, and yet after 3.5 months of this fiscal year, the Republican leadership has not been serious about addressing the crisis facing the dreamers.
When the White House says, look, the Democrats are hurting children if the government shuts down because there's funding for CHIP, for the Children's Health Insurance Program, something Democrats have wanted for a long time.
You know, the cynicism here has no end. 3.5 months into the fiscal year, they have not funded the CHIP program, which, if brought to the floor 3.5 months ago, would have probably got 90 or 100 votes. The Community Health Center program. 1 out of 4 people in my state of Vermont get their primary health care through community health centers. This program is like 50 years old. It's supported by Democrats. It is supported by Republicans. They haven't reauthorized that program. So we have many issues out there that have got to be dealt with. And all that we are saying is to the Republican leadership, you control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Govern. Don't keep passing these 1-month continuing resolutions, which the Pentagon, it is really hurting the Pentagon. It is hurting so many aspects of our country. And once again, Mitch McConnell knows right now he does not have the votes. And if he goes forward and he loses, it is Mitch McConnell and our Republican colleagues who are shutting down this government.
So that's your message to federal workers who may not be getting a paycheck if there's a shutdown tonight, that because, I mean, I should point out members of Congress still get paid, unlike those federal workers. But you say it's Mitch McConnell's fault, it's the Republicans' fault.
Let me repeat. He does not have the votes. He knows he does not have the votes. Why do you go forward in losing rather than sitting down and negotiating an agreement in a bipartisan way? And here is the good news. When you talk about disaster relief, I think we can reach an agreement pretty quickly. When 87% of the American people support legal status for the dreamers and a path towards citizenship, I think we can reach an agreement. There's good legislation that has been brought forth by Senator Durbin and Senator Graham. We can reach an agreement in terms of how much we spend on the military and how much we spend on the needs, the domestic needs of working families. I believe that you bring people together in a few days, you can address these crises. But we can't do it unless there is negotiations, and the Republicans cannot simply say, here it is, you take it or leave it. That is not the way that we can run a government.
You mentioned a poll a second ago. I want to show you a new CNN poll today. It says 31% of people would blame Democrats for a shutdown. Does that concern you?
Sure it does. Look, I don't want a shutdown. I think a shutdown is bad for millions of people who depend on government services, certainly bad for federal employees. It is a bad thing. And that's why I hope that the Republicans understand that they have to negotiate and they just cannot do whatever they want.
Mick Mulvaney, who's the director of the Office of Management and Budget, he cited you today in a briefing, quoting something you said about a shutdown back in 2013. I just want to play that for our viewers.
Bernie Sanders, one of my favorite. What they are saying, by the way, this was of me back in 2013 in the group that was trying to figure out a way to force a debate on Obamacare repeal. What they are saying to the American people tonight is maybe we have lost the presidential election. Maybe we have lost seats in the Senate and the House. This is Sanders talking now in 2013. It doesn't matter. We can now bring the government to a shutdown, throw some 800,000 hardworking Americans out on the street, and we're going to get our way no matter what. This is exactly what they accused the Republicans of doing back in 2013.
How do you respond to that?
Well, let me respond. What Mr. Mulvaney is talking about is his desire to repeal Obamacare when President Obama was the president. Not very likely. So what they would do is shutting down the government to throw tens of millions of Americans off of health care, which is terrible unto itself. But obviously, Barack Obama was not about to repeal Obamacare. What we are talking about today is to address the crisis facing dreamers. This was a crisis precipitated by Donald Trump when he rescinded Obama's executive order. You have hundreds of thousands of young people frightened to death about their future, whether or not they're in fact going to lose their legal status and whether they will be subjected to deportation. This is a little bit different, I think, than repealing Obamacare.
Just lastly, the meeting tonight at 8:30 with Senate Democrats, I'm wondering what you expect to come of it or what you hope to hear or expect.
Honestly, Anderson, I really don't know. I'm very anxious to get down there and see what will be discussed. I just don't know.
Are you saying you want to end the interview? I'm kidding. We'll let you go.
I'm delighted to talk to you.
No. You got to go to the meeting. Senator Sanders, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We're going to be following late developments live, obviously, throughout the next 2 hours and long into the night on CNN. This is a rally for DACA young people, dreamers, at the Capitol happening. Coming up next, see who Donald Trump once thought should get the blame for a government shutdown versus who he now thinks should get the blame. That and new polling on who voters say they'll actually blame. We'll show you part of it ahead. Later, citizen Trump, candidate Trump, and the alleged porn star payoff. See how one reporter followed the money that led to a blockbuster story that would be toxic to, well, frankly, pretty much any other president.
Hey there, it's Alicia Malone. I'm the host of the Filmstruck podcast, a show made by film lovers for film lovers. We have great conversations with people working behind the scenes in Hollywood movies, like Liz Hannah and Josh Singer. This is an incredible story. It is the very first feature film script for Liz Hannah. She wrote it without knowing if it would ever make the big screen, and then
3 months later, I got a call that Steve and Tom and Meryl were all reading it and that they were really thinking about doing it. So that was the best and most terrifying phone call I've ever gotten.
Can you imagine your very first feature film being made by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep? Make sure you subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
As we look at a pro-DACA rally at the Capitol and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi speaking, a quick reminder, we're continuing to monitor late developments as the government shutdown gets closer, along with a preliminary vote to prevent it. We'll continue bringing you the news on this throughout the program, throughout the night, throughout the next hour on this broadcast. First, another big story, though. The Wall Street Journal, as you may know, has been reporting that a lawyer for Donald Trump arranged a hefty cash payment to an adult porn star as the 2016 election campaign was winding down. The reason? The Journal says to prevent that porn star, who goes by the name Stormy Daniels, from disclosing details of an alleged affair with now President Trump. Both the attorney, Michael Cohen, as well as Ms. Daniels, have said no such affair took place. Mr. Cohen told the Journal its reporter was, quote, wasting his time, pressing for details about the payment, which was arranged through a private company registered in Delaware. He did not appear, though, to deny it. Joining me tonight is Michael Rothfeld, one of the Journal reporters who wrote the story. So what are the details of the payments that the president's lawyer made to Stormy Daniels?
Well, they agreed to pay her $130,000, at least Michael Cohen did, the president's lawyer, through a limited liability company that he created in Delaware. And
so they created this limited liability company especially for this payment?
Yeah, Michael Cohen created it, and he's listed as the authorized person on the paperwork in Delaware, which we obtained, and opened a bank account and then wired the money to the lawyer for Stormy Daniels in Los Angeles at City National Bank.
Why $130,000? It just seems like an odd sum.
It is. I mean, who knows what is the market for, keeping a story of an affair quiet right before an election involving a porn star. But we had previously reported that the National Enquirer's parent company paid $150,000 to a former playmate for keeping her story silent about an affair with Trump. So it's kind of in the same ballpark.
And that's something I assume that, and you may not have the details, that the lawyer for Stormy Daniels negotiated with Michael Cohen.
That's right. That's right. Actually, it was the same lawyer, Keith Davidson, who represented both the former playmate and the former adult film star.
Okay. And how did you figure out that the money Cohen paid ultimately to her went through this company, which was, I think, called Essential Consultants?
We talked to a number of people who were aware of this deal and who corroborated it for us based on their accounts. And in addition, we found the company. And so based on that reporting, we were confident that this is what happened.
Can you tell if a company has made other payments? I mean, would this company only exist for this one payment, or is that impossible to know?
It's impossible to totally know unless you have the company's bank accounts. We do know that Michael Cohen created this company in October 2016 and then actually used it a few months later for another deal, which was a consulting contract with a healthcare payment company. But it's not common when you create something like this. It's typically for a one-off, because if you were going to use it for ongoing business, you'd create it in your own state as opposed to Delaware.
And was this, wasn't Stormy Daniels talking, based on your reporting, talking to ABC about perhaps appearing on Good Morning America?
Yeah, she was going to go on Good Morning America. They were in discussions. She was also talking to various other media outlets because she was apparently in discussions with Michael Cohen for several months, and they were dragging on, and she was afraid she wasn't going to get payment before the election, so she was kind of looking at all her alternatives as to how she might get paid.
So the supposition is that once they found out she was maybe she informed them that she was talking to GMA and others, that's when the payment ultimately...
Yes, I mean, that was potentially some leverage that she had, but, she has to be careful she doesn't get accused of extortion, because, if you go too far and say, if you don't do this, then you have to pay me, or else then you could, be guilty of that.
What has Michael Cohen said about all this?
He's just said that these are recycled stories about an alleged affair that never happened, because there was some reporting in a gossip website about this allegation of an affair a number of years ago involving Stormy Daniels, which he denied at the time. He did not address the settlement payment, the non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Clifford.
So he just ignored that part of it?
Yeah, I talked to him on the phone, and we also emailed him questions, and he just didn't respond to that part.
And Stormy Daniels is not talking?
She's not. No, we repeatedly have emailed her before our story came out last week reporting on this. We emailed her again this week when we reported about this company Michael Cohen created, and she hasn't responded to any of that. The only statement she provided was Michael Cohen sending us a printed statement signed by Stormy Daniels, apparently, which has a signature on it. We tried to confirm with her that she actually wrote that or sent it, but she didn't respond.
It's a fascinating story. Michael Rothwell, thanks so much.
Anderson. Thank you.
Well, coming up next, we'll go back to Capitol Hill, get an update on talks to avert a government shutdown. Are lawmakers actually making any progress at this hour? A key vote will happen soon. We'll have the latest in a moment.
Get their act together.
Quick update. You'll notice that it's after 8:30. However, the Democrats' 8:30 meeting has yet to begin. Senators are still talking in smaller groups among themselves. We'll obviously keep you posted on when the meeting actually starts. If there's a government shutdown, it won't be the first time. We've been down this road before. And in the mid-90s, one of those shutdowns even lasted 3 weeks. Randy Kay tonight looks back.
October 2013, the U.S. government shuts down under President Barack Obama. House Republicans, led by Speaker John Boehner, wanted the White House to agree to lower levels of discretionary spending. Conservatives demanded that any funding bill delay implementation of Obamacare by 1 year.
The reason we have a shutdown right now is because Harry Reid and President Obama want a shutdown, and they have refused to compromise at all.
National parks were shut down, even the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. Angry veterans protested and stormed past the barriers. Obama took a lot of heat. Finally, after 16 days, Speaker Boehner gave the green light for an end to the standoff, passing a funding bill that most of his fellow Republicans opposed. A funding bill that, in the end, even after the shutdown, did not defund Obamacare.
We've been locked in a fight over here trying to bring government down to size, trying to do our best to stop Obamacare, and we fought the good fight. We just didn't win.
Hundreds of thousands of government employees who had been furloughed returned to work, back to critical medical research programs, to national parks, even the Panda Cam at the National Zoo.
We'll begin reopening our government immediately.
This country went without a shutdown for 17 years until the government shut down under President Obama. The last two before that were in 1995 under President Bill Clinton, who battled it out with a new Republican majority in the House and Senate.
It is particularly unfortunate that the Republican Congress has brought us to this juncture because, after all, we share a central goal, balancing the federal budget.
The first shutdown under President Clinton lasted only 5 days, but another that started in December 1995 lasted for 21 days. Everything came to a halt, including any new claims for Social Security and veterans benefits.
It's very difficult to work with a president who seems to be primarily driven by his political advisors to engage in public relations stunts.
Back in October 1978 under Jimmy Carter, the government also shut down for a long period, 17 days. Carter said no to a defense spending bill, which funded a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier and a bunch of public works projects he called pork. Carter ultimately prevailed. The projects he thought were wasteful were removed from the bill. Randy Kaye, CNN, New York.
Well, we're a little over 3 hours from the next shutdown, unless the Senate makes a deal. Gloria Borger, Dana Bash are back with us. Dana, I mean, those images back in 2013, national parks closed down, veterans storming the World War II monument. Obviously, the leaders on both sides of the aisle are happy the parks will stay open this time, if for no other reason than it'll allow them to avoid those kind of, visuals.
That's right. And remember, the big difference politically between 2013 and now is that then the Democrats had the White House. Barack Obama was at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and there was, some blame going around, as you remember, saying the Republicans are responsible for all of these things. That could be, it likely is why the parks and other things closed down. And now, when Republicans are in total control of the government, they're saying in the Trump White House that it's not going to be that extreme. Probably for the reason that you just alluded to, Anderson, which is that the optics won't be as bad, assuming that they can't get to a deal by midnight tonight. Because, of course, the sort of work day in the U.S. government isn't officially until Monday, but parks and other things that people around this country enjoy, they don't stop on the weekends. I will just quickly say that since you and I last talked, the things that I'm hearing from sources on Capitol Hill is some discussion about whether or not the CR, the continuing resolution, should maybe go through the State of the Union. That's what Joe Manchin, the West Virginia Democrat, is saying to reporters in the hallways. I was just told from an administration source that is not a White House demand, meaning that they don't want to deal with this until after the president delivers his first State of the Union, which is supposed to be on January 30th.
Gloria, I mean, for what we just saw, the past government shutdowns, they haven't lasted, or they have lasted days, even weeks in some cases. They've had very real consequences for people, especially those people who live paycheck to paycheck, as many Americans do. It goes far beyond just politics.
Well, sure it does. I mean, first of all, let's talk about federal workers. 850,000 federal workers would be furloughed. Then you have essential federal workers, about 1 million of them at least, who would have to work without pay because they have to do their jobs. And when you think of things you don't normally think of, like the Center for Disease Control that tracks flu outbreaks around the country, processing your passport, for example, if you want to go abroad, if you want to go to a museum, if you want to go to the Smithsonian, you're just not going to be able to go. So, these are things, I mean, people are still going to get their Social Security checks, and you're still going to be able to get in an airplane because air traffic controllers are essential. But I do think that, the longer this goes on, the more people will feel it. And by the way, we're all related to our government in one way or another. And I think that's why you see the polls overwhelmingly showing that people just don't want the government to shut down.
Dana, I mean, has it ever worked out well for either members of Congress or White House?
No. Well, actually, let me take that back. Yes. In the short term, it worked out well for Bill Clinton because Republicans were convinced back then, after they had just swept the Congress when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House, they were convinced that Bill Clinton would get the blame, and he didn't. Republicans did. Now, I said the short term because it was during that shutdown that an intern named Monica Lewinsky brought pizza into the Oval Office, and we know how that story ended.
Gloria, Dana, thanks very much. Right. Coming up next, a chat with the Wall Street Journal reporter who's been digging into the alleged cash payment to an adult film star by the lawyer for then-candidate Trump. If tonight's voting fails to head off a shutdown, and we could know in about 90 minutes, the question for most people, of course, is simple. What actually gets shut down? Our Tom Foreman has been looking at that. He joins us now. So, Tom, what gets shut down?
Hey, Anderson, 850,000 government workers could be locked out of their offices and left out of their paychecks. That's what happened when the government shut down in 2013, and it would likely be the same this time. Also, many services would likely be delayed for the public. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention would back down their flu tracking program, even as the nation faces the worst outbreak in several years. Some senior nutrition programs would be paused. 200,000 passport applications went unprocessed in 1995 during that shutdown. Congress funds much of the scientific research in this country. In 2013, that meant some experiments went on hold during a shutdown, and they suffered some costly losses of data as a result. In space that same year, for more than 2 weeks, NASA reportedly stopped monitoring potentially dangerous asteroids. A big one, by the way, is expected to brush by Earth on February 4th. And as for the 417 national parks, the administration wants to keep limited access wherever possible, but services would be reduced, and all 19 of the Smithsonian's museums would shut their doors after this weekend, Anderson.
I'm not going to try to think about a giant asteroid heading toward Earth right now. We got enough to worry about. Sarah Sanders is tweeting tonight about the shutdown and the military trying to coax senators to vote to avoid the shutdown so it doesn't hurt military families. We've been hearing that all week, of course, that a shutdown would hurt the military, would it?
Well, not much. I mean, yes, some military pay and other benefits might be delayed, not to diminish how that would be an impact on those families. But Congress has previously gone out of its way to diminish the impact on military families to keep it from being too egregious. They might very well do that again. And troops would stay on duty. Indeed, roughly 1.9 million government workers would keep at it since their jobs are considered essential. People like air traffic controllers, security officers, food inspectors, prison guards, Social Security checks, those would also go out, important to the senior population in this country, and the post office would be open. But in virtually all of these cases, people would be working without pay until the shutdown is over. That could cause some real difficulties. And, important to note, all of this could be pricey for us, too. We don't get a break because people don't work. In fact, one cost estimate says that shutting down the government, if it happens, will cost taxpayers an additional $6 billion a week. Anderson.
Tom, thanks very much. Senate Democrats are about to start their 8:30 meeting ahead of a 10 p.m. procedural vote. The question is, will they hold their line and keep the votes that they need? For that, let's check back in with CNN's Phil Mattingly, who's been working the halls there. Phil?
Yeah, Anderson, I think what we can say right now is right before Democrats are supposed to meet, the entire caucus is supposed to meet behind closed doors. There have actually been a series of meetings leading into that. A handful of Democrats have been in Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's office over the course of the last half hour. Here's where things are right now. You have competing interests inside the Democratic caucus. There are a lot of members who have made very clear this is a fight that they want. They want to have this fight now. They don't believe the process has been above board that the Republicans have led, and obviously DACA is an enormous issue here. But you also have Democrats like Indiana Senator Joe Donnelly. He's up for re-election in 2018. He comes from a red state. He's already said he's going to vote yes on the Republican short-term plan. He has said he's working on his members, trying to get them to agree to something. Senator Joe Manchin was heading into Chuck Schumer's office just about 2 minutes ago saying the same thing, trying to figure out some pathway forward. The space here, Anderson, that you're hearing, where there's a potential deal to be made, or at least a potential agreement to avoid a shutdown, is on some type of shorter-term continuing resolution, shorter-term funding bill than the one that currently stands. The timeline on that's still very up in the air. You've had some Republican senators, like Senator Lindsey Graham, somebody who is opposed to the Republican plan right now, a Republican himself, who has said 3 weeks is probably about the sweet spot here. The big question now is, will the votes actually be there? Republicans are waiting right now. They want to see where Democrats end up. They want to see how this closed-door meeting will actually end up. But I think the question right now, Anderson, that everybody's waiting for an answer to is when the Democrats, as an entire caucus, get inside the meeting, what will the feeling be? If they come out and there appears to be some willingness to move in some way on this and maybe drop some of their demands related to DACA, perhaps there's something there. That was what White House Legislative Director Mark Short, who's also walking through the hallways right now, told reporters a short while ago. But if they're not, and it's worth noting, they have not been for the entirety of this day, then most certainly the vote that will be happening in about an hour and a half now will fail, and it looks like a shutdown will happen. But I will say the change over the course of the last 30 minutes, Anderson, is there are very real talks from Democrats who do not want a shutdown to happen. They don't speak for the entire caucus. They're not even sure where the entire caucus is. But those discussions are ongoing right now. What we're waiting for is to see how they all end up, Anderson.
Yeah, Phil, I mean, Dana and Gloria, in the last break, we're talking about Democrats in red states who are feeling pressure and may peel away from what Chuck Schumer wants. What is the pressure that they are facing? I mean, why would they peel away? And how impactful would that be on the Democrats being able to hold the line and keep it below 60 votes?
So I think the interesting element here is the group we've all been looking at, Anderson, is if you look at the Democratic caucus, the 49-member Democratic caucus, there are 10 members of that Democratic caucus that are running for re-election in 2018 that come from states that President Trump, then candidate Trump, won, in many cases very handily in the 2016 campaign. So a lot of people have been looking to them to see where they were going up to end up on this. Now, that's not a homogenous group. Not all of them are going to vote yes tonight, but 3 of them have already said yes. A handful of others haven't committed one way or the other. I've been talking to aides who assume people like Senator Claire McCaskill from Missouri will end up being a yes on this. But it's worth noting, right now, as it currently stands, there are 50 Republicans present. They would need 60 yes votes to be able to move anything forward. Already, we know Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, a Republican, is opposed to any type of short-term CR. So that means Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell would need at least 11 Democrats at this point to come aboard to move anything forward right now. So the question is, they're going to get some Democrats, no matter what, even on the short-term House-passed funding bill. But if there's some type of resolution, if there's some type of agreement on a shorter-term CR, can they get the votes of 11, 12, 13, or 14 more Democrats? That's what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is waiting to see. That's what we're all waiting to see as Democrats start to meet behind closed doors, the entire 49-member caucus right now, Anderson.
All right, Phil Mattingly, thanks very much. More now on all of this, what's next, and the political impact of all of it, the finger-pointing, deal-making, with us now former Republican National Committee Chief of Staff Mike Shields and Democratic strategist Simone Sanders. Simone, I mean, you saw that poll, the CNN poll about who gets the blame. I mean, everybody gets some blames. Republicans, according to that poll, and the president get more. But Democrats don't come away unscathed either.
You know, Democrats don't come away unscathed, but I think it's important for folks to hammer home the opposite of what the president has been hammering home is that, you know, look, Republicans are literally in charge of the government. They have the White House, the Senate, and the United States House of Representatives. And if a deal cannot be reached, it is solely because of the Republicans' inability to govern. Look, there was a continuing resolution that was passed. We were almost here a couple of weeks ago. And the only reason we are to this point right now is because Republicans failed to negotiate in good faith with Democrats. And when they finally did negotiate, the Republican president blew up the deal. So Democrats want the government to be funded, and hopefully we can come to a deal. But I talked to folks in Schumer's office, and they said there are still a lot of disagreements.
Mike, I know you agree it's all Republicans' fault.
No, look, I mean, that was great reporting, as usual, by Phil Mattingly, because the entire report is about what's going on inside the Democratic caucus, because that is the game tonight. The Republicans are there to vote for this. And what's interesting about continuing resolutions, normally Democrats vote against them because of what's in them. This time they're voting against it because of what's not in it. So here's what's really going on. There's an anonymous senior Democrat who said, you know what, we're so worried about our base is so fired up right now, and we don't want to douse the flames, so we've got to have a fight, and we've got to shut the government down. Senator Sanders said it himself. Mitch McConnell doesn't have the votes. He needs 60 votes. Unless we're going to go to 50 votes, if that's your position, which I'm for, because then we'll pass a balanced budget amendment, outlaw abortion, double the military, make the tax cuts permanent. We can't do that because we need 60 votes in the Senate. The entire game is whether or not the Democrats are going to throw their red state people overboard to keep their base happy. That's literally the game.
So I just want to reiterate what Phil Mattingly said. Phil Mattingly just said the question is whether they can get 11, 12, 13, 14. The fact of the matter is the Republicans do not have the votes. If they could keep their caucus together, we literally would not be here.
You need 60 votes.
But look, Mike,
so you have to have the Democrats in that meeting decide that they're going to make their base, and you know they're going to make their base incredibly angry if they vote for this.
We know that there's a bipartisan bill, and it's truly bipartisan, that, you know, it's not just gives to the Republicans and not just gives to the Democrats. There was a bipartisan bill that could pass the Senate. Mitch McConnell will not put that bill on the floor because he's unsure if Donald Trump will sign it. Congress is a co-equal branch of government. Mike, if you really want to fund the government, put the bill on the floor and let the Republican president veto it.
Mike, the Republicans keep saying and pointing to that the Democrats want to hurt children by doing this. I mean, if the Republicans had really been interested in the CHIP program, couldn't they have done this quite a while ago?
Well, the CHIP program has now been up for vote 4 times. and the deadline is now. So what's interesting is the DACA deadline is in March. And there's going to be a vote on that. We know that there's going to be something happening. We need to fund the government now, and the CHIP program is in there. And the Democrat, which, by the way, is
right. But if the Republicans were so concerned about the CHIP program, isn't it something they could have done months ago?
They can, or they can do it as standalone. You don't have to put CHIP into this bill.
But here's the point: if you have to get 60 votes, and you need to have something in the bill to get 10 Democrats to join the Republicans, you put something in the bill in good faith and say,
you're playing
"Hey, Democrats, here's a program that the Republicans don't normally want to overfund." But we're going to put it in this bill to get your votes. And they say, no, wait a minute. We've got to have DACA, which is a political issue, because we need to make our base happy. We've got to shut the government down, which is why, by the way, they'll shut it down. Then they'll come back and the Democrats will say, OK, guys, we've checked the box, right? Left-wing Democrats, we've checked the box. Can we now, in the red state Democrats, get our vote and open the government again so we can try to run in a re-election? That's the politics of the Democrat
because Republicans are in charge, and furthermore, it is a gross misconception, misrepresentation to suggest that the only way to fund CHIP is through this bill. Republicans could have funded CHIP last week, last month.
But to Mike's point about DACA is something that they could negotiate down the road a few weeks from now.
Potentially, but you know what? Since Donald Trump had made that announcement in September, over 15,000 quote unquote dreamers have lost their protective status. They cannot work and their lives are in limbo. And so the idea that nothing happens to anyone until March is just not true. Look, I think if folks want to get things done, cut a deal. There is a bipartisan deal that has been made.
Watch the drama of the Democrat caucus. That's the fight tonight.
Simone, Mike, thanks very much. We've got plenty of government shutdowns over the years after failed talks on Capitol Hill. We're going to look back at how some of them actually played out next. Well, as we wait for tonight's first Senate vote and with the shutdown fast approaching, it's worth looking at how Donald Trump, when he was a citizen, once viewed a similar moment back when his only role was, kibitzer-in-chief.
I mean, you just have a president that is not leading and not getting people into a room and not shouting and cajoling and laughing and having a good time and having a terrible time. But, all of these different emotions and things you have to do. But you have to get people in a room and you have to just make deals for the good of the country.
So according to Donald Trump back in 2013, the buck stops with the president. And now, according to Donald Trump, it's the Democrats. And as we showed you before the break, we have new polling on what voters think. A combined 47% say they'll hold the president and Republican lawmakers responsible for a shutdown. 31% say the Democrats, and 10% say they'll blame all of them. The same polling also shows the president's job approval ticking up slightly. Joining me now is CNN chief political analyst Gloria Borger and CNN chief political correspondent Dana Bash. So, Dan, I know you've been talking to sources. I'm wondering what you're learning tonight.
Well, a few things. First and foremost, and I know Gloria has heard some similar bits of information from her Democratic sources in the Senate as well, and that is the name of the game for Senate Democrats right now is to try to extract the shortest continuing resolution as possible from the Republicans and from the White House. 3, 4, 5 days. And the goal, according to some Democratic senators I've spoken to and aides as well, is to do that in order to keep the negotiations going. And the negotiations that I'm talking about are the ones that happened in the Oval Office today with President Trump and with Chuck Schumer. Now, the obvious question is, what are those negotiations? I don't know the answer to that. They're holding that very close to their vest. But it was Senator Schumer, his chief of staff, the president, his chief of staff, John Kelly. And now they're trying to figure out if they can keep that going. And obviously the substance of all of that is everything we've been talking about for many, many days. It's obviously keeping the government running, dealing with the military spending caps, dealing with funding children's health care, and, of course, the Democrats' big request that they are going to the brink about, which is dealing with the Dreamers. Having said all that, Anderson, I will say that I have not talked to a Democrat or Republican who have not said they don't think it's going to be very possible to do all that, even a short-term CR, by midnight when the deadline hits.
Gloria, is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, look, Chuck Schumer wants this to be sort of 3 days to 5 days because he doesn't want the air to go out of the balloon. He's got to keep his red state Democrats in line. He's lost a few of them. So far, they're holding. But, the longer this goes, the more potential there is for him to lose the people he needs to stop the Republicans on this. So he wants to get it done quickly. But he has to get the approval of Senate Democrats, and then the House folks on the Democratic side have to also say to him, well, okay, we're going to be with you. We're going to be with you on this. So there's a lot of issues. You know, he can't do something in the Senate that in the end is going to anger his folks in the House. And so it's a balancing act. And they all realize, I think, that they all look foolish to a degree, but they all have their talking points down right now. You know, the Republicans saying that the Democrats are willing to give up children's health, and that's not, you know, so we're going to hear this for a little bit. Who knows what they can do before midnight?
Yeah, Dana, I mean, the idea of, you know, a 3 to 5 day extension, to the point of what some Democrats are saying, it does seem like a lot to try to negotiate even in 3 to 5 days.
Sure.
DACA. You know, military stuff, talking about the children's health insurance program. You know, Bernie Sanders was talking about disaster relief.
Sure. That's a part of it as well. Of course, it's very much to do in that short amount of time, which is why on the Republican side, they're saying, no, we need to be a little bit longer if we're going to keep these talks going. But that's how we got where we are in the first place. I mean, they're, you know, sort of still, they're negotiating the size and shape of the table right now. And it shouldn't be happening at the 11th hour where we are right now. I will say I talked to a couple of senators who said that they were meeting with what they called themselves the Common Sense Caucus, some Democrats, some Republicans, who have been trying to just find a way themselves. And we have in the past seen bipartisan compromise born out of those such meetings in the United States Senate. Unclear if it would happen today.
But you know, Anderson, these are people who don't talk to each other. They haven't really talked to each other for much of the past year. You know, we're not used to seeing bipartisan meetings or bipartisan negotiations. So even the trust between Chuck Schumer on the Democratic side and Mitch McConnell on the Republican side just isn't there.
So, I mean, do they have a working relationship?
Well, let me just say this. Chuck Schumer voted against the confirmation of Mitch McConnell's wife when she was up to, Elaine Chao, when she was up to become transportation secretary. That did not get it off to a great start. So I do think that they're just not used to dealing with each other. And since they're not used to sitting around the table, Dana talks about, I don't know how this is going to turn out because this is unfamiliar to all of them.
And if I may just quickly add, Anderson, Gloria is absolutely right. They don't work together very much. But by nature, both of these leaders in the Senate are deal makers. So they can do it. The issue is in this environment, particularly the Republican leaders, they need the political cover from the president, and that is what is wanting right now.
Exactly.
Right. Gloria Dennis, stay with us. We're going to take a look up next how a shutdown would impact some critical federal agencies, including the Pentagon. President Trump says a shutdown would be devastating to the U.S. military. We'll look if there's truth in that. Some answers when we come back.